Hello and welcome back to another part 3 right now. So, about the cliffhanger just earlier I did to you, sorry about that again. So, I was talking about models that you can install and try to use them, of course, for your projects. It is a very good thing to do, especially, of course, if you don't want to bother modeling or, let's say, it's unrealistic within the time frame to do this kind of model. Thing is, I have two examples, which, let's say, installing models was kind of not really good, honestly. Example one is assessment one. It wasn't a good situation for me, to be very honest, but I think sharing it still is maybe not too bad, actually. We had a tiny, let's say, group assessment where, well, let's say it wasn't graded, of course, at that time. It was just like a small, let's say, example of how things would have worked and such things, just tiptoeing around the topic. Topic was actually motion tracking with Unreal Engine. Well, not Unreal Engine per se, but people could decide, the whole class as a group could decide if it would do it in like Cinema 4D, actually I think it was, or in Unreal Engine. So, and to be fair, our class was like, I think with me 6 or 7 people, so it wasn't a huge class, because the topic we studied at the time, and maybe still is, not the most, let's say, sought out subject there is. So we have small classes. Actually, that's the third class I'm in. So I knew someone who was in the very first class for this specific subject, and there were 5 people too. So the classes are really small. I'm not sure if they changed anything or there are more people now, so I cannot say about that one. And this group assessment, entailed, okay, do an animation or something, a character, a small concept, nothing too big. They gave us like a frame rule, for example, animation should last 30 seconds, it should have a neat story behind it, something that is conclusive maybe, and the story in the same time where it starts being told, it will just end the story as well, so you have like a conclusive everything. And there was a problem of people of course me as well, I overestimated myself as well, but the other people overestimated themselves even more, which is a bit troubling, because for the assessment, like I said, motion tracking, and the school did have actually a suite where you could hop in and do all the funny stuff you want to do. And thing was, no one was really volunteering to go into the suit, and I actually wanted to do that just because of funsies. I was curious, and then we started talking about the concept and such, and then I noticed, of course, many people didn't have the same view as me, which you will notice a lot in real life and life as well, that people don't have the same interest as you. This is completely normal. What is, let's say, less beneficial is that people aren't ready to compromise, which is a problem. I wanted to compromise, but thing was, they were so set on Cinema 4D, as like doing the motion tracking Cinema 4D, they kind of forgot that rigging is a thing too. Meaning, first we had to, of course, conclude, okay, what kind of topic do we want, what kind of story do we want, how many characters are in there. We had actually 3. It would be a really small project. It was about Christmas and how the tree would burn, and some elves that kind of set that on fire, so really clumsy elves and such. 3 different ones. One was, I think, older, one was a girl, a bit clumsier, and one was just a boy, actually, a bit naive. And for those 3, we want to do motion tracking, so, like I said, I was ready for the suit and such. But they kind of, let's say, argued too much on what they wanted to do. And I'm sorry if I actually start explaining this story in a weird way of, I'm self-righteous or something, or I did everything right. Thing is, I tried to compromise, like I said, but they really underestimated actually how much time it will go in there, and the problem is, in the end, the project even wasn't finished, and those were these kind of people who, of course, weren't, let's say, happy with the work, even though it will be perfect or not perfect, but like out of frustration, and they want to be perfect in every way and such, and they kind of forgot the whole picture. And it was really frustrating sitting in that kind of class, because I tried to be the voice of reason to some degree. Like I said, I'm not doing everything without mistakes. Everyone does mistakes. I mean, you don't have those projects for no reason. It is here for teaching you. It is here for practice. So this wasn't the issue in itself. The issue more was that people weren't ready to compromise, or weren't ready to listen, to make things, let's say, more approachable, or let's say more efficient. So in the end, they didn't come along, and also I got sick, so they didn't have someone for the suit, so someone else did the suit thing. I really was tuned out of the project, because every time I tried to propose something, and I felt like there was the right, let's say, advice or direction, they would just not listen or ignore, or just don't go into the details. And they just assumed, funnily enough, we were searching for models, right? Of course, we knew we didn't have time to model characters. I mean, at the time, I didn't even consider to wanting to model characters. This is rather something new, actually, I discovered a few months ago that I want to do. So, what was the issue? Many things. Except for the people who weren't compromise ready, or mediating and such things. They kind of did talk bad about Blender, and I don't mean in a mean way. Like I said, I'm not a Maya person, or let's say fan, for example, so, but I wouldn't judge people using actually Maya, because I know there is a whole industry behind it. There is a reason someone uses that, right? So I don't want to judge the software someone's using. I just, like I said, it's not my thing, of course, I won't judge, and if it's the right thing, just go ahead. I mean, if you want to buy a license and don't want something for free, or if you're going into that industry, that's what you're learning for, practicing for, just go ahead. I mean, no one bothers, right? But when you try to, of course, let's say, tell people what they have to do, what happened in my school time there as well, a lot of people try to gatekeep of, Blender, everybody talks about Blender, it's not so good, it's not industry ready. And every time I think, like, yeah, for a big industry, a Blender is not so good, like pipeline wise, but I want to do something small. I mean, small company, small development, so for me it suits really well, like I said. And they just didn't really leave me out of business, and this project, this assessment was the problem too, because they searched for models, right? And those models all were made in Blender. So this in itself isn't an issue for now. And they weren't ready for Unreal Engine, so they, except for me, everyone voted for Cinema 4D, so yeah, democracy, yeah. Not always the wisest thing, especially here, because no one had really a lot of experience with Cinema 4D. I mean, we had a tiny assessment of making motion graphics there, but not rigging. So rigging is entirely another beast. And they imported the models, the alpha models they liked there. And you know what the main problem was? I told you there would be 3 elves, right? Well, they imported 2, so, and those were kind of models where you had to pay, actually. School actually paid, which was hilarious if you ask me. I don't know how they convinced them, but it doesn't matter, right? So they convinced them, they got 2 models, the school bought it for us, which was really nice, actually. And I told you they were free, right? And the third, they actually took just the boy models and just did some edits on it. A lot of changes were made and such, but I didn't make them. So it was someone from the group who was a bit more experienced in Cinema 4D. Not like perfect, but it was kind of okay-ish. The modeling itself did have a lot of mistakes and such, but this is something I cannot say how it turned out because I was sick, so I didn't care at the time at all because I didn't feel like I was participating in the group, even though in the concept phase I was kind of working my ass off, so I didn't feel appreciated at all, so I just didn't care about the end result at all because I knew nothing in there will be part of me like screaming, yeah, I was a part of that shit. So yeah. And then when they finished changing those models, problem began. Of course, we heard that if you finished mocapping your movements, you will then need a rig for that shit, right? And well, guess the models weren't rigged. Were just models. And because I expressed that I would use Blender and I was the only person regularly using Blender at the time, they just assumed I could do rigging. Just the surprise on my fucking face when I was ignored and such and not being part of that shit. And then suddenly, if it's about rigging or something they cannot do, I was almost immediately I go to suddenly. And then I told them, you heard me right in the last lesson. I said I want to specialize in simulations, so simulations is not the same as rigging. I hope you are aware, right? And then they just go, well, you can use Blender, right? And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Come on, like I'm the only person who uses Blender. I've gotten made of fun of me that I use Blender and it wouldn't be so industry and whatever. And thing is, I just don't want to be a small gear in a big company. I want to be the whole, let's say, house or the whole machinery, right? This is my goal, actually. I want to be much better what I do. Small steps, but good steps. So I felt even more disencouraged and I felt like, are you just stupid? I mean, if someone tells me they can use Maya, I wouldn't just jump to conclusions and say, oh yeah, you do rigging for a living, right? I mean, what if those people are modelers and they're like, what are you talking about? And it's the same thing with Blender, right? I mean, they just assumed that and it felt me it was a bit strange suddenly when they needed something from me that they would just do something like this. And that's one of those moments that they realized that they wouldn't look at the stats and the specs of the models they downloaded just because it wasn't so compatible with Cinema 4D for the use or the purpose they had. I wasn't sure what exactly the problem was because, like I said, I don't like Maya, that's one thing, and I don't use it. And the same goes a tiny bit for Cinema 4D, actually. And of course, because it's not free, but other reasons as well, like I just like using Blender more, so why should I use something else, right? And they just assumed that I can do Cinema 4D as well and just open it and be like, oh yeah, I know what the problem is. So sometime later I was a bit disencouraged and just, let the project go on just without me. I was sick anyway, so I really didn't care at the time. And despite in the end, I did a small simulation where I simulated a burning tree because I heard that the project was not like cancelled, but it wasn't just finished. And they were upset with me because I couldn't do rigging, even though I did communicate it really clearly from the very beginning and said we need to take a closer look of what kind of models we want to buy. If you're buying something, I would rather do something for free, of course. But they were so insistent on the elves, it had to be characters and well-fledged characters at that as well, that they just said, no, I will pay. And I thought, okay, you can do that, but it's just a student project and it wasn't even graded, so it was just a small assessment for us actually to get some practice done with motion tracking. And like I said, there are no results. I don't know what happened. They just got upset with me. That was a bit shitty. So yeah, what can I say? It was an experience, right? Even though not so a good one, but experience is experience. Second example for when I wouldn't suggest installing models is, well, the first one was basically you didn't know where to put the model and how to change it or for your purpose. And of course, we are students and we are still learning, so of course I shouldn't assume that it would go with the first click. So of course you will need to dive deeper to understand what was the problem, how do I make it work, how to fix it, of course. And those were people who didn't have that kind of self-reflection going on, and they just blame me for that I couldn't rig, which was again stupid because that's not the thing I wanted actually to focus on. For now, of course, it's a totally different story. I mean, it was over a year ago, like 1.5 years. Now, of course, I have another view of those things. Now I know I want to do modeling, I want to do rigging, but this is a conclusion I didn't reach at that moment yet. So through experiences, right? And I noticed I did quite like it. I like the sound of doing rigging, doing your own models. This is why I started doing these kind of projects and uploading and doing some more in the hopes of getting better and getting feedback. So, second example was when we had some CGI, actually. We had to do a small recording, doesn't matter. Frame rule was actually 20, no, I think it was 10 to 30 seconds video material. It had to be MP4, format 60:9, so nothing too crazy, just regular stuff, right? And then we had to do a small story again, small concept, where you need to use at least one model. We had two similar assessments. So one was actually you have to integrate a 3D model, one which was static at the first assessment, and the second one was a similar one, but instead of it being static, it had to be animated, but not rigged, just animated, just, I don't know, a falling tree, for example. And the first assessment and second assessment were a bit similar. Like I said, just the animation was a whole difference, and we used a different software. So with the first one, we used Cinema 4D tracking, and with the second one, we used Nuke. So there was also this kind of difference, but except for these two differences, there was everything the same actually from practice-wise. So first assessment, I wanted to do a golem. I really love elephants, so I went to the zoo and filmed some elephants. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not experienced with, let's say, making movies or recording, like something like a cameraman would do, a DOP, director of, of the camera, of, photography and such things. I'm not a photography person at all. Not that I hate it, but I'm just not too good at it, to be very honest. And so at the time I didn't know. It was really difficult to get a recording where the CGI would actually work because of the tracking points, meaning, let's say like this, maybe depends on the recording if it's nighttime or daytime, but you need a lot of contrast because otherwise the program cannot pinpoint tracking points from that. Because if you have just, let's say you have a recording which is all white, the program won't understand the movement. So when you move from left to right, it won't understand the movement at all. So if you have, let's say, a recording of white and you have let's say a black point, or let's say 3 black points in the middle, it will understand, okay, this recording is going from left to right, like 3D tracking. In short, I'm not sure if I'm explaining it too right because I don't have the programs open right now, because right now I don't want to do any 3D tracking, but for the sake of elaborating the example why you shouldn't, or let's be a bit more careful when you download 3D models. And thing is, if you have, and you finally, like me, have a recording which does work with 3D tracking, it does check all the boxes for perfect 3D tracking, then you have the next hurdle actually, or let's say obstacle. you have to integrate the 3D model so it looks like it's in the recording. So lighting has to be right. With the second assessment, the animation has to be right. The size has to be right. It has to be realistic. So you have to do a lot of realistic stuff in here to make it believable. And I stated already in the beginning that I rather want to do something stylized. So it wasn't really my strong suit, honestly. And people had issues as well, but they had like different issues. Whereas I had issues with making it look realistic and having to do recordings over and over, because I didn't know when you record, let's say, one of the most difficult recordings is recording animals because they are unpredictable and such, which, yeah, I the fuck didn't know. So when I had finally a good recording and such, I struggled a lot with realism, so it wasn't really my thing, and still to this day isn't too much right now, or at least not my preference, where I want to do my work and such. And people had other issues, whereas they didn't want to do 3D models, which is fair enough. Like I said, you can download them, do whatever you want with your money, and they had kind of different problems. They had problems with their 3D models. They weren't either compatible with the 3D software they were using doing the 3D tracking, or they had to, for their concept, so it wasn't a must-have, right? They kind of changed a lot of their models. For example, I did a 3D rock golem, nothing too crazy, because I thought I'd rather have a simple model and the tracking is going right. Whereas those people thought, nah, let's make it complex and realistic. Like I said, it's their thing, it's their choice. And they a lot complained that it wasn't compatible, or there were blend files and blended files sucked because it wasn't compatible, and they just blamed Blender, which actually wasn't sitting right with me, because I thought, come on, just read the damn description of the model. It just says it is not compatible for those things. Like I said, I'm not sure if they took OBJ files or FBX files, so I just cannot say, to be very honest. I can just say what they said and nothing more, because they didn't have any insight in there, but it kind of struck a nerve with me. So, and in the second assessment was even crazier. They again installed some models, and again they didn't watch out if it was compatible. But even better, and also for info, this was after the group assessment where they assumed I could do rigging. They just wanted to rig in Cinema 4D, which was not the assessment at all. Like I said, it's the same assessment, but just with an animated character or object or whatever was the concept of those people. So someone had something like an Iron Man suit thing going on, and they were upset that they couldn't do the very ultra complex Iron Man animation, whereas those people worked a full-time job. And actually in our studies it was recommended to just only work part-time, so I'm not sure what her personal situation at all was. I don't want to judge, but she was kind of really overworking herself, and also really burning her out already. I mean, you saw it in her eyes and such, and making so much stress for something that, let's say, it wouldn't come out perfect anyways, because we're students, we are learning, like I said, and it's okay to make mistakes, right? But when you work full time and you don't watch out what kind of models you install even, and don't even bother to look if they're compatible or not, of course you won't maybe pay attention if those characters are even rigged. So she started kind of rigging those, and like I said, it wasn't the main assessment. Main assessment still was 3D tracking and making it look realistic. And our teacher was really insistent on the animation suddenly, which wasn't really helping her. It wasn't helping me as well, but that's just another story. I just did a Rubik's 3D cube, which was solving itself. I didn't do something too crazy, honestly. Some people might find that a bit stupid. Maybe with me it was, yeah, it is boring, yeah, I know, but I just wanted to have proper practice. It was more important to me. I mean, what good does if you do an over-the-top concept and you cannot execute it? You're just making yourself frustrated. So, and they just blamed again Blender for that. I'm not sure why they keep downloading or installing Blender models. So I don't know if this is a pattern of those people. I do generally not understand. And they always blame Blender, and it really struck a nerve with me because I thought, come on, guys. I mean, there are so many other models here and there, or if you're really that insistent using Cinema 4D or Maya, I mean, if you're being bratty, you can just model them in those programs. If you're being that insistent that Blender is crap, come on. You don't have to give crap to those people who invented Blender, who developed Blender. I mean, it's just disrespectful. I mean, imagine if people complained that some things didn't, let's say, change or were implemented in Minecraft. No, everyone loves Minecraft and to play Minecraft, so no one judges on that one. So just leave it be, okay? So, and it was kind of, like I said, frustrating, and again, they did, of course, succeed in the end. Happy ending. But she was totally burned out, so long story short, watch out what kind of models you download, look and watch closely if they are compatible with the purposes and things you want to do. For example, if you have to maybe to watch out, okay, is this character rigged and such? I know, obvious, but like those two examples pretty clearly state that people do not watch closely, and I think they can just eyeball it or just make something. So if you want something to be rigged, I would watch out if it was rigged, and maybe not complain so much if it was made in Blender or not, because I don't think that's making the quality better or worse at all. So like I said, it depends on your purpose. And if your purpose is to be in a big company later on, I wouldn't touch anything with Blender then, because Blender isn't for really big companies, because the infrastructure is made for Maya. So many people also assumed suddenly when I was on the, and still am, on the Blender train, that I was kind of, let's say, too optimistic, that people assumed, that I assumed that companies would just throw out their whole, let's say, infrastructure for Maya and just, replace it with Blender, which was really unrealistic, and I'm not sure why people assumed that about me, so don't tell me, I don't know why. And they just kind of badmouthed Blender the whole time, and it wasn't sitting right with me, so I'm just happy I finished graduating there so that I could just do my own projects. And that's the time where I noticed that I was improving to some degree, in a good way. For example, growing less frustrated when I do model something, or if something needed something adjustment, or if I need to do a redo the model. I mean, it happens, right? Or topology, for example, or watching out for more, let's say, that there are less angons and such things, or watching out, okay, what kind of purpose do I fulfill here? What do I want to do? If I want to do rigging, I should watch out that everything has to be quads, for example, and all those things. And moral of the story is, except for group assessments suck, like anyone would agree, I mean, let's be honest, that just don't badmouth something someone is, let's say, proud of to use, yes, but also wants to use it. I mean, come on, just let them do their business, okay? Let's be nice to each other. So, and hopefully that gives you a clear mind of what kind of, let's say, side I am on, or rather, how should I say this? More of a am I using Blender even, or what is my purpose here? I do understand very well that it's not an industry standard at all. I mean, like I said, it's not made for that. It's made for smaller projects, smaller companies, and am very well aware of that. So I'm not oblivious to thinking, okay, I can reach everything with Blender. That's not the case here. And somehow in the studies, people there were a bit arrogant and ignorant even. And you will encounter those people everywhere, of course. So it was kind of discouraging at the time. So I'm really happy that I graduated from there and did a lot of, mistakes, yes, and I learned a lot from that. So I think the best way really to whatever you do, Maya, Cinema 4D, Blender, that if you do your own projects, if your own terms actually, that you will grow the most and learn the most, and you will see firsthand, does it work, doesn't work, that's that. And maybe not sticking your nose everywhere, what people use and what not to use, to be honest. And that's why I'm really happy that the Blender community is really supportive and helping people. The subreddit there is really good as well, so taking a look there every now and then really helps out a lot. So without any further ado, not sure if I have to say any more actually. Not sure if I will voice the next parts again. Not sure. Actually, from the procedure, I'm doing more or less a lot of things commonly, so I will always use the mirror modifier a lot of times. I will a lot of times use the array modifier. I really like the array modifier. Sometimes I cannot decide on what kind of axis I should, like coordination wise, what I should move the model sometimes, so this is why I sometimes just duplicate them. But if you are doing many things at the same time, I will use the array modifier, of course. Those are my favorite ones I'm currently always using. Beveling as well, of course, because beveling makes things a bit, let's say, more relatable, because in realistic your desk isn't, let's say, razor sharp, it has some edges, right? It's a bit more realistic, but it does add some character as well. So I'm not doing it on the purpose of making it more realistic, but more of the case of it's relatable. That's how more or less it would look like. So that was the purpose of doing this kind of workstation here, so that people can see, oh, I think Pompompurin is gaming here. He's actually using the setup. It makes sense. Having a desk makes sense, of course, if you want to game there, and having screens and such, which we will see, I will model any second now, actually. So I wanted to have something that makes sense, or like having a thought process of, oh yeah, it makes sense, it's here, ah yes, a gaming mouse, or of course a keyboard and such things, or a mouse pad. So all these small things here. Like I said, I like a lot of overthinking here, so I'm not sure if I went overboard or it was just right, actually. This is something I will notice when I do more of these projects, and then I will see if it's over the top or not. Of course, if you have any feedback, I would like to hear that a lot, so that's no problem at all. Yeah. So, without further ado, I don't have anything to say anymore, so yeah, see you in the next part. Not sure, like I said, if there's music behind it or just nothing. I will just try both, and then I will see how that goes.